It is my pleasure to now welcome my friend and advisory board member of SIEPR, John Thompson, one of our longest-serving advisory board members, who will introduce Jim Farley and Annamaria Lusardi to kick off our first session. John is the co-founding partner at Thompson Capital. Previously, he served as vice chairman of Heidrick & Struggles. He was recognized as one of the most respected CEO and board advisors in the nation, having completed more than 200 CEO searches and more than 400 board searches. And I'm looking for him, and I'm hoping that he is somewhere around here. He worked both public and private boards to recruit new directors, as well as serving as an advisor on major restructuring projects. There he comes. John was the first recipient of Heidrick & Struggles Global Lifetime Achievement Award. In addition to his role on the SIEPR Advisory Board, he serves on the board of the Virginia Tech Foundation and on the advisory board of the College of Business at the University of Mary Washington. Thanks very much for being with us here today, John, and please join me in welcoming John to the podium.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome to the summit. I'm grateful to be attending my 16th SIEPR Summit. So by my calculation, I attended the fourth SIEPR Summit. And I'm delighted to be introducing this year's keynote session. And I think we're in for an exceptional start to the day. A keynote features Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford and a board member at Ford Motor Company. The moderator would be Annamaria Lusardi, who is a senior fellow at SIEPR. First, let me introduce Anna. Anna is a world-renowned expert in the area of financial literacy and has pioneered scholarship on personal finance education, teaching students how to make financial decisions that impact their life. As she is fond of saying, financial literacy is as important as the ability to read and write. Before coming to Stanford, Anna was a professor of economics at the George Washington University and a professor of economics at Dartmouth College. I recently asked her what she is most excited about, and she mentioned teaching personal finance. She developed a financial decision program more than 10 years ago and is very happy to teach a similar course started by Michael Boskin and a former SIEPR director, John Chauvin, here at Stanford. She believes that this course can change a student's life. I could go on, but let me stop for a moment and welcome you, Anna, and thanks for being with us. Next, I'm honored to introduce my friend, Jim Farley. In addition to serving as Ford's president and CEO, as I mentioned, he's on the board of directors at Ford. As CEO, Jim has focused on transforming Ford to lead in the digital transformation of electric vehicles and the automotive industry in general. He and his team have come up with something they call Ford Pro, P-R-O. And Ford Pro is managing their fleet and commercial business. This includes telematics, software services, and financing, all offered on a subscription basis. So who would have ever thought that Ford Motor Company would become a software company, right? Ford Pro, listen to this. My jaw dropped when I saw this. Ford Pro is expected to deliver pre-tax earnings of between $8 and $9 billion this year, compared to $7 to $7.5 billion of Ford's traditional business. So Jim's team has made a monster transformation at Ford. Jim also serves on the boards of the U.S.-China Business Council and Harley-Davidson. His passion for automobiles continues outside the workplace as a collector and racer of vintage vehicles. It's not uncommon to find Jim at Laguna Seca or Sonoma Raceway or other traditional tracks in U.S. and in Europe, Spa, Le Mans, racing his '65 Ford GT40, which was featured in the movie Ford versus Ferrari, and his 1966 427 Cobra. He races that in the U.S. and primarily his GT in Europe. I'm so glad Jim could be with us today, and now please welcome Jim Farley and Annamaria Lusardi.
Jim, I think you wanted to make some opening remark about Ford, about your vision for Ford. I'll let you speak first before I maybe start with a list of questions.
Thank you. Just a few context setters for our discussion. I'd say the first one is that EVs, despite all the politicization of the powertrain, are alive and well even outside of California. So it's going to be a vibrant market globally and here in the US. Number two is that as a CEO, one of the surprising things is how much time I spend on recruiting talent and how little the media ever asks me about it.
Okay.
This transition is really about talent. That is our big bet as a company. And it's shocking to me how little attention it gets, the talent itself. The third thing I would say is that the ultimate fitness test, at least in the low CO2 powertrains, are going to be the Chinese players. And we've never seen a competitor like this before. I worked at Toyota for 25 years. And I think I know Toyota pretty well around the world. But companies like BYD are a new fitness test for our company and our industry that we have really never seen before. And maybe the last point is that iconic legacy companies like Ford have really no sustainable advantage as we go into this transformation. I look back when I was born in the early 60s, the average company would stay on the S&P 500 for about 60 years. 50 years later, it's down to 20. I look at the transition in the smartphone industry, 3 players, 85% market share in 2008. 5 years later, 85% market share in 2 totally different companies. And the transition for auto is, I think, going to be a similar type of transition. And the biggest part of the transition is what John mentioned. It's not powertrains. It's that we're going from an analog to a digital product. And that is a complete game changer on how people use cars and what a trip is going to be. And unfortunately, most people focus on the transition of powertrains. But that is not going to be the big change, 10, 20, 30 years from now, I believe. That's all I wanted to say.
So I really wanted to have Jim started because, first of all, we are so excited to have you today. I cannot think of having a better speaker than you today. And you can see already from his original remark that, we need visionary leaders, in particular to lead such a company in this difficult time. And so, absolutely excited to have you here today. I cannot imagine, in a sense, leading a company which is 120 years old, right? It invented the assembly line. It provided, all these good jobs and affordable cars to many millions of families. But how do we lead? How do you lead such a company into a modern digital one?
I would say the most important transition for the company is a cultural transition, which is not a fashionable topic that you read in the Wall Street Journal, but it should be. The transition as a company, because we're an industrial company still. We still make industrial products that are very complicated, but the cultural transition into a digital product, even in internal combustion engine vehicles, is a really foundational, fundamental change. We never, ever thought that our vehicles would get better with age. We never thought about investing $2 billion or 20% of our profit in an advanced electric architecture to take the control of the vehicle back from our tier 1 suppliers back into the company. And that is a fundamental cultural shift for both those that are running manufacturing and supply chain and traditional engineering. And it's also a culture change for of course, newcomers. And actually, oh, by the way, it's shocking how many newcomers want to come to the company, because I think they see Ford or companies like Ford kind of about to go through what some of the other consumer product companies have gone through. And it remixes everything. I would say the last thing is, I'm always a big believer in doing what a company does naturally well. So I have no idea why, even as a competitor, I saw this. Ford wakes up in the morning and does commercial vehicles, pickup trucks better than almost any company I've ever met. And it does emotional products like Bronco and Mustang. We just don't put the company in a position to do that all the time. But I really believe strongly that the other cultural shift is for us to shrink our focus into what we really do well, like the pro business, which was never a focus of the company, frankly, other than a sales channel. I think that is also a shift in thinking for our transition, that we can't be so enamored with the future that we don't think through that in terms of serving customers that we know really well. Pro Power on Board's a good example. You know, we're number 2 so far this year in hybrid sales in the US. We're also number 2 in EV sales in the US. And our hybrids offer exportable power, unlike Tesla and Toyota. If you buy an F-150, the best-selling vehicle in our country, you know, our hybrid allows you to run your house for 5 days. And the extreme weather events has made this innovation super popular. But we did that for truck customers. We're focused on them, innovating for them, not innovating for everyone.
Because you touch upon this IV, let's come back now to the IV one more time. Why do you think it has become so controversial and politicized?
Well, I think some of it is pretty natural in a way. At the beginning of the EV journey, they're expensive vehicles. So mostly wealthy people. And I think that's a big factor in politicization. As well, after Dieselgate, the Volkswagen event, and actually expanded far beyond, Europe had bet so heavily on diesel for low CO2. When that all came unraveled, regulators around the world, especially in China, bet on all electric, not partial electric like hybrids, all electric. And when they did that, you know, our industry's always been heavily regulated, fuel price is always political, but this entered a whole nother political reality for us when regulators put their foot on the scale and bet on pure electrics. And they continue to do. And so it's natural, especially in the United States, where these things are debated in a free society, you're going to get this kind of reaction. And of course, no new technology is like a straight line, right? It goes like this. And so when those dips and changes happen with those pesky customers, you know, which is great, you know, there's always someone who wants to take advantage of that moment. But the reality is, when you go back, customers are very rational. When you go back to the reality of the duty cycle of them driving, it's just so clear that there's a group of people, it's growing, where an electric car is just better for their duty cycle. It's cheaper for some customers. It doesn't require a lot of compromise. It's not everyone. And so I believe the true value of these vehicles, no matter how they're debated, you know, wheel to well, all the other debates, they're just better. I particularly don't like going to the gas station. A lot of people like having their car filled up every morning. Actually, it's interesting. Our commercial customers are adapting to EV fastest because they have different duty cycles, repeatable, a plumber, electrician, and they are brutal about ownership costs. So fuel costs, insurance, repairability is much more important to them than a retail customer. And they're actually adapting EVs faster than retail. There's just not a lot of offer. So I believe the truth will get out. It's not for everyone, but we are definitely in a political environment. And when we launched the CATL battery deal in Marshall, Michigan, I mean, it was amazing to see the kind of media coverage around the iconic American company Ford, the only one that didn't go bankrupt, welcoming CATL and building batteries together in Michigan.
Yeah. Irrespective of that, though, but how do stay competitive in the IV market, in particular given the competition for China?
Yes.
And I also want people to know that he's driving a Chinese car, a BYD,
All the time, yeah.
right, all the
Yes.
time, because he says, I always drive a car from the competition, which I think is a very clever strategy.
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Ford's very important. We have the most U.S. workers. We bet on the UAW. We make 100% of our trucks in the U.S. Our competitors do not do that. So we're a very American company. And the Ford family, Bill Ford, our chairman, I think he's the 4th Ford ever to run the company since Henry Ford, including Henry Ford. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of an interesting company. But the Chinese government and companies bet tremendously many, many years ago on new energy vehicles. They developed unique battery IP, lithium-ion, iron phosphate batteries, almost no fire risk, lower energy density, but it's getting better, very inexpensive batteries compared to NCM cells that you would find in a Tesla and Ford. And now 70% of all electric cars sold in the world are sold in China. One market, 70%. And because of their slowdown of their economy, they've now become the biggest exporter of vehicles in the world. In Europe, where I worked at Toyota, it took us 10 years to get to 5% market share. In January, Chinese OEMs were 13% of all electric cars sold in Europe. Almost zero a couple years ago. So how to beat them? I think it's a cost game. It's a cost game. It's an old-fashioned cost game, and it's going to be an innovation game. But innovation only after you're cost competitive. And this requires a complete rethink on engineering the vehicle for manufacturability, much lower labor content, new distribution strategies, a completely different kind of vehicle. And oh, by the way, some of that we can apply to the ICE and hybrid world. I had to decide as a CEO, how do we get that fitness? And talking to my team and people I trust outside of the industry, we decided that the smaller vehicles would be the place where we had to be truly fit compared to the Chinese. And so we built a small Skunk Works team in Long Beach, California, that we have not talked about for 2 years until now. And at the beginning, they designed a platform with 17 people that would take Ford almost 1,000 engineers to do. They did it in half the time, and they have a completely radical approach to the vehicle. I think that's the only way to beat on the cost side. But that's not sufficiency. Sufficiency will also come from making sure that our vehicle and the software is oriented towards specific customers that Ford has a higher intimacy than I think the Chinese players would have. And I'm not going to go into details, but whether it's work or high passion, we have lots of opportunity to innovate on behalf of those customers because of that intimacy. And it's on us to do that. And I think the combination of brutal cost, new way of approaching cost, plus innovation for those subset of customers, I think it's going to be pretty hard for them to beat us. But we have to execute it.
Amazing. So I have to ask this question. Being at Stanford, what's the role of AI? Do you think in the car industry, how do you plan it to use it at Ford?
It's a good question. I don't think we have the full answer to that question. I always kind of think through that kind of question through the customer's lens. I think obviously the company's going to get more fit and more efficient with AI across, in almost everything we do. I mean, you can imagine all the different ways in an industrial company like ours, consumer company. But actually the one I'm most excited about is level 2 and level 3 autonomy. We spent $1 billion plus on level 4 autonomy like Cruise and Waymo, and about 2 years ago, I gave up. I said, we're not going to spend any more money on that. I thought it was too hard of a problem to solve, and I actually wasn't even sure what the end destination the problem was to solve for. And so when I had the new talent in the company, I listened to them really carefully, and we made a bet, and I think it's a really exciting bet that people haven't seen play out yet for the whole industry, not just us, which is highway miles, eyes-off driving. And the operating domain will probably be, sunny day, off-ramp to on-ramp, and then the ODD will get bigger and better with better sensors, better AI processing. But the number of empty calories for most people stuck on the 101 in bumper traffic around the world, as a metaphor for around the world, is enormous. And when you look at the duty cycle of how people actually drive, hands off is now 30% of our sales, 70% margin. I mean, I've never seen a priceable feature in my 40-year career like hands-off driving. And that's a gateway to eyes-off, which is right around the corner. And to give people the ability, metaphorically, to push a button on the highway and not have to worry at all, so they can start their day an hour later and take their first, video conference inside their car, or meditate, or whatever they want to do safely. It's going to be a big game changer. And I believe that's where AI is really going to change the lives of our customers in a way that maybe they don't expect. It turns out that our category could give people time back, a lot of time back. Like, who would have thought that's what we can do? But that's what we can do. Another one is predictive failure components for our commercial customers. If you're a plumber and electrician, you own 4 Fords, and your truck goes down, you lose 20% of your revenue. So how cool would it be for Ford vehicles to diagnose problems for themselves before the vehicle goes off the road? And so we designed the vehicle now that will be coming out. The wiper motors can detect the actual resistance on the windshield, and we know exactly when your wiper blades need to be replaced. Or a silicon carbide inverter when it starts to fail. AI is good enough now, we think, that we can predict most components failing before they fail. For a plumber, that will be a huge benefit. So I think it'll be those kind of capabilities in the end will be at least in the first inning.
I like that. I like that very much. So as Mark and John were saying, so I teach a personal finance course here at Stanford. We are starting this summer. If there are students here, just another advertisement for this course. And if we look at the budget dedicated to cars,
yes,
right, it's an important part, right,
yes,
of the budget of a family. And so, how do you think of that responsibility? And what is literally your recommendation to the American consumer? And by the way, I'm going to tell to my class, I asked this question to the CEO of Ford.
No one in my company is going to like the answer to that question, which is buy a used car. But
that's what we recommend. Here we go.
I hate to say it, but that's a pretty smart thing to do. If you do your homework. Maybe a little unexpected, and I may get in trouble for that one. But it is Stanford, right? So I got to tell the truth. No, I think, look, it's Henry Ford, right? My grandfather was an hourly worker. He was the 389th employee of the company. Like, he came to Ford because he could have gone to Packard, he could have gone to Cadillac. He went to Ford because the Model T. And the Model T in the electric business, I would easily argue, is the Model 3 and the Model Y. And he's doing actually what Henry did, just drop the price and try to make up for the manufacturing scale to make it more affordable, more people. Unfortunately, what Henry found out is what I think many are going to find out, is you commoditize your product. And eventually your product gets so commoditized, like driving around Palo Alto, when all your neighbors have one, that people are going to want choice, right? And choice matters. And we don't make shampoo. We make cars. They're different. And so I think affordability is super important, but it's very hard to do. It's like really hard to do. And for our company, we've had many ambitions to get back to our roots to be affordable. And I would say largely most of them didn't work because we weren't really honest about what it would take to be the low-cost producer. And some of that was at odds with even our labor strategy and our company's DNA of being American. I think the new reality, though, that's so exciting is with this incredible cost challenge of these batteries. We can get back to the roots of the company and really, in a way, disrupt ourselves and get to an affordable electric vehicle. There'll be many affordable electric vehicles, but most of them will be compliance vehicles. The OEMs do them to be compliant with the regulations, but they really don't want to sell a lot of them because the cost is way higher than the consumer's willing to pay. So the most important thing is to actually make an honest living on an affordable vehicle. And to do that, you have to radically redo the vehicle. And I think that's probably the biggest fitness test of my management team is can we do that with an affordable EV as an American manufacturer here in the US? And I think Tesla's trying to do the same thing with the Tesla 2 or whatever they name it. And I think that's exactly what BYD's doing. So it's going to be a really interesting horse race.
So we have heard and we have aware of your passion for car, which is amazing. And, so for example, you are also aware of the importance of car in the life of people. And interestingly, Ford is investing heavily in motorsport.
Yes.
So tell us more about kind of this investment, and does it come for your interest in racing?
Yeah, thank you for asking this because I love to get this off my chest. I don't think anyone you've met has wasted more money on motorsports than me. So, if you're a racer, John would know, it's super expensive to race. So I like to think that actually I'm kind of much harder on my team around motorsports because it's my hobby. Look, not many industries have an indigenous sport. Henry Ford actually funded, he had a bunch of companies that didn't make it, but he funded Ford Motor Company because we won a race on a lake in Michigan. And he got, with the winnings, he started his next car company, Ford Motor Company. So it's been in our blood, and of course, Ford versus Ferrari, and that was a great moment for us. Look, I think it's interesting now, motorsports has actually come back to what it originally was, which is a tech transfer. So our deal with Red Bull was interesting because we have no interest. We used to own Formula One teams. And I have absolutely zero interest in owning a Formula One team. But the aerodynamicists at Red Bull are the best aerodynamicists in the world. And if I want to get my battery size down, I need to have the best aerodynamicists at Ford. And the same with prognostics. All those Formula One cars are constantly doing self-diagnosis of all the systems in the vehicle. And they are some of the best AI models you can find for self-diagnosis. And it turns out that Ford has really good battery tech for high discharge, which is what Formula One needs for really quick acceleration. And we have that with electric drag racing that we're into. And so we are back to the old days of tech transfer, just different tech. It is not like the pistons and the transmission. None of that actually matters. What matters is aero, digital capability, and high discharge batteries. And that's why I think it's really valuable. And as well, on the passion side, we're starting to really get traction on the off-road business. Our Raptor has become a really successful sub-brand. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, almost 20% of the whole company's profit. And now we're really challenging with Bronco, Jeep, in the very emotional off-road category, and winning Dakar and winning Baja and bringing that technology back to people who drive our vehicles is important. And we're really learning a lot in the off-road world about technology. So that's what I'm excited about motorsports. It's not the same old, cigar chomping executive who says, we beat Ferrari at Le Mans. That's great. That's a 75-year-old story. What matters now is the tech transfer.
So I'm going to ask one last question, and then I really want to open the floor. I know there are a lot of people very interested in asking you questions, but I wanted to tell you you are my favorite speaker by far in any standard. And my last question I want to ask is that, and I'm very grateful, you're going to meet with students right after here, and there are, a few students here and parents as well of students. So can you tell us what is your recommendation for students, right? Now, like what should they study? Should they study engineering, AI? What is your recommendation?
I think when we're all old enough to be grateful for everything we have, and what I will tell or what I think matters is actually not those things. It's more like if you're lucky enough to have passion, follow it as far as you can.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I like cars, but it's
clear you do.
It's been a truism my whole life. I almost can't understand it because, and I love minivans. I don't just like fancy collector cars. My favorite car I own is this 1973 Bronco, which I spend probably 4 hours a weekend underneath with my kids working on. I could hire someone to do that. I love the therapy of working on a car. So I guess not everyone has a passion, but if you're lucky to have one, like go as far as you can. And like my wife was an actress. She went as far as she could, but then she couldn't make it anymore. She couldn't feed herself. So there is a limit. I think the second one is try to put yourself in as many awkward situations as possible. I mean, I got a chance to lead Scion. That was like a great lesson. There was just a few of us. I got to be at the very early days of Lexus. Toyota was nowhere in Europe when I went over to Europe. And all my friends were like, don't take that job. Don't take that job. Don't take that job. As soon as they said that, I'm like, I'm definitely taking that job. So I think, it may sound a little, not Pollyannish, but maybe a little bit too hopeful. I do think when I look back, all the mistakes I made, most of them I learned the most and kind of got the most value out of the hardest things I did.
By the way, I shared your passion for car, but not minivan.
Okay.
Okay. So, and we have a great tradition in Italy of cars.
Yes, you do. The Multipla, first car with 3 people on the front, 6-passenger, 2-row. Very interesting car, the Multipla.
And I just learned, actually I didn't know this, and Jim was telling me this morning, did you know that Ford was trying to buy Ferrari? And it was Enzo who said no. No. Because?
Because we said in the contract that Ford would control the Formula One team. And he said, absolutely not.
And?
So that was it. We got within a day of buying it.
He has the contract. I'm going to say
I have the contract in my office. If any of you come to Ford, I'll show you. And Mr. Farley, he signed everything with a kind of interesting pen. Colored pen, and he marked up the whole contract, but that one, no. No way.
I can see it. Well, super exciting. I cannot stop asking him questions, but it's also time for the audience to do so. And Mark, maybe you can help us in like taking some of the questions, and in particular, if I don't see you, and I see a hand over there. So
okay, where do you say? Right here?
Yeah.
Okay, right here. This person, gentleman right here?
A microphone, it's over there, please.
Okay, right here.
Okay.
Someone's got his.
Microphone.
Does anyone have a microphone or where are you?
Can you speak loud enough? We cannot. Actually, my microphone is.
Oh, there we go.
Wait. No, we've got a microphone right here for you, sir.
Here we go.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I was very touched by how humble you are, actually. Because not a lot of people right now, given the circumstances, but I mean, I think the humbleness when you see the clarity of what's happening. Now I feel like you're really building a product-driven company. That's very important.
Yes.
My question is, how do you feel? Just this last week, Apple announced they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Were you relieved? How do you
Yeah.
feel?
Yeah, I mean, well, interesting enough, people wouldn't even know this, but the number one consumer product on the earth, I think in revenue, is probably the iPhone, right? I think it's the iPhone. Number 2 is the F-150. We don't sell a lot. The average price is $55,000. So that's interesting to me because to answer your question about Apple, Apple's such a powerful consumer brand. I mean, holy cow. I mean, there wasn't a day over the last 3 years as a CEO I didn't think about Apple entering our industry. And I know they got close with Tesla. So, you know, it could have happened. And actually, early in my career, I went with Al Mullally to Apple right when I joined. And I met with Steve and his team. And they asked a lot of questions. And we left that meeting going, why did they ask all those questions? So not entirely. And Doug Fields works at Ford. He's in charge of EV development and advanced technology. And he worked at Apple. And before that, he was the father of the Model 3. And I spent 6 months recruiting Doug, coming here every weekend. And he never said one thing about what he did at Apple, which was really impressive. Look, I think my uneducated view of that opportunity for them is that they seem to tend to go into segments when there's a big technology change, like VR or AR. And so I think we all privately had the opinion that they were going to wait for level 4 autonomy to democratize and then use the robo kind of car as the moment to enter our industry. And I think it became pretty clear a couple years ago, at least to us, that level 4 autonomy is kind of like just a little, you know, it's just, will it happen? Will regulators allow it to happen? And I think that really changed maybe their view. Is, you know, someone on the highway, would they have the same connection with Apple vehicle when it was in eyes off the road mode? I don't know. When I read that, I was like, you know, but it's kind of interesting. A couple years ago, if I read that, I would have been probably relieved. I didn't really have a big reaction to it, other than maybe they have some good talent. My reaction is like, BYD, totally vertically integrated. They make their silicon carbide inverters themselves. They make all the batteries themselves. You know, it's so amazing. Their scale is like something we've never seen, like Henry Ford scale in the teens. So I would say Reddit was like, told my team, let's make sure that there's talented people, and let's get back to work, you know, competing against BYD.
Okay, one more question. We have Bruce over here. And because we started 5 minutes late, I'm going to use my 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
2 related questions. Last Friday, I briefed DARPA on financing the lunar economy. And as part of that, we're asking ourselves not only what financing we need, but what human capital we need when the hidden figures of Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, differently abled innovators are so underseen and underused. So you're talking about the transformation within Ford. How are you going to use these hidden figures and elevate them?
Yeah, I think that's kind of Ford's legacy, really. I mean, $5 a wage. I mean, my grandfather was an orphan. He had nothing. You know, Ford is filled with stories around the world of uplifting people into the middle class. And you know, when I look at my team, who's going to do this, I think that we're in really pretty good shape. I find your comments really fascinating about what is the scope of our work statement. I look at my best friend's in a chair. He comes to Stanford actually to get all of his stuff done. And I think, like, what is my role for him? Just to make a transit that he can get in and out of? Or should we have a role in, let's say, people getting around in their own homes? Or I was talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson, like, as we start to explore our like, should Ford have a role in, because the design criteria is totally different, right? You know, everything is different. We could learn a lot of things if we design for a different physical environment. I don't know the answer yet, but I do find personally innovating kind of how people get around, like in this room, would be really interesting. Doug Fields was the lead engineer for the Segway. Segway has done a lot of things over time. And I think maybe Ford should do more than we have done. Like for my friend Wayne. And I think that would be part of our remit as a company. Even though on the surface, investors would go, why are you doing that? You know, to some extent, we have to think for ourselves. I appreciate you bringing up that point. I've been thinking a lot about it lately. Because there's a lot of really crappy solutions out there.
Okay, one more question.
One more question.
Let's see, I think we have one right here in the back, right here. Ben, give him the
No,
microphone.
actually, we have
Thanks.
a microphone.
For being here. Could you talk a little bit about the corporate decision to use the Tesla supercharger network?
Yeah, I wanted to ask that question.
Thank you for asking. That's an interesting one, but I think very symbolic in a way for how the industry is going to have to work together where we never have before, and that just needs to end. Look, I was with my family in Tahoe on a summer vacation a couple years ago, and I drove back down the Monterey Peninsula, and my kids kept saying, "Hey, Dad, there's a supercharger network charger right there," and we barely got to Monterey. And I was really kind of thinking, wow, like they have something that works really well. And we normally never work with our competitors. So I started asking my team, and Doug had worked at Tesla, and he's like, I don't know, maybe they'd be interested. So we talked to them at the working level, and they were like, not interested. So I called Elon directly. And I said, hey, you're a mission-driven company. We're number 2 in EV sales. This is more than 2 years ago. Like, if you're mission-driven and we're number 2, why wouldn't you want to give access to your supercharger network to our customers? And he's like, I think that, yeah. And so we talked about it. It took a while. We talked about it. You know, you have to have not only adapters, but you have to have a lot of software to verify. And so it was going to make a lot of work to do this. And we worked on it, and there were a couple of like us conversations, and I have to give him incredible credit. He totally was committed to making this happen. Now, I'm sure he wants to make his company a platform company. They already sell emissions credits to a lot of people. The charging network is terrific. It's in the right places. People like the experience. By the way, the plug is better. When you drop their plug, it doesn't break. We liked their technology, actually, as well. Not just the number of chargers and the experience. And so we put that together. I thought it was going to be a big, good for our customers. And what I didn't realize is that all the industry followed. Like within a week, GM and that, like everyone followed. There's still a few holdouts. I don't know what they're waiting for. But, yesterday, we shipped the first plug. Actually, I'm going to go to a supercharger station here and hand deliver an adapter to one of our local enthusiasts. And the cool thing about electric people is there are enthusiasts. This is like a little pink pony that I got from one of our
Ford evangelists who give these out at charging stations. It's kind of probably what a gas station was like in the teens. And you know, everyone talks to each other. And they go like, how far did you make it? And where are you going next? And you know, so it's kind of like old school human beings talking to each other. Like it's a kind of a cool thing. At the business side, I knew that we were going to make some vehicles that could be interested to Tesla customers. And if they had to have access to their supercharger network they loved and didn't have to give it up to switch brands, maybe that wouldn't be a bad thing for our business either. Because I believe those charging experiences are marketing moments for the brand. So it worked out. You know, we're just starting the journey. A lot more excitement than I expected, frankly. People really want to get. We had 21,000 applications for their adapter in the first day, which is way more than I expected. And I think, you know, as I said in my social post, I give Elon and Tesla team a lot of credit. They did not have to do that, but they did the right thing for a lot of people.
Amazing, and amazing decisions as well. Jim Farley, this was absolutely amazing. Please come back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.